Hey everyone, I have some big news for listeners in the Los Angeles area. On Thursday, January 8th, Tonebenders will be hosting a free screening of the film F1 at the Glen Film Center. That will be followed by a live interview with the sound team behind the film. Glen Studio One is about the greatest place possible to hear a film with such a dense and powerful sound design. This is the room where some of my favorite films were mixed in over the years. Classics like Saving Private Ryan, E.T., Apollo 13, and more recently, Stranger Things. They were all mixed in this room. So come on out to the Glen Film Center at 900 Seward Street in Hollywood to hear this spectacular film, and then join me for a live Tonebenders episode recording with the F1 sound team right after the film. January 8th, doors open at 6:30, film starts at 7. Use the link in this episode's description to sign up now. You're listening to Tonebenders Sound Design Podcast, presented by Sound Ideas, where we talk with the sonic artists behind our favorite films, games, and series. Sound Ideas is closing out the year with a massive year-end sale, and you're invited. From now through the end of December, enjoy 50% off all proprietary items, including premium sound effects and production music trusted by creators worldwide. Don't wait. These savings disappear on December 31st at midnight as the calendar moves into 2026. So check out sound-ideas.com today to save 50% and create something amazing. Hello, my name is Tim Muirhead, and I'm happy to be hosting this episode today. I recently saw the film Nuremberg in a packed preview screening, and I was quite surprised by how much I enjoyed this film and how complicated the sound work was on it. What I assumed was going to be a standard courtroom drama ended up being a much larger film, and it sounded fantastic. The dialogue was crisp and upfront, and the sound effects were dense and intense. So I looked up who did the wonderful sound work on this film, and I was able to get them on the line today for a good talk. So let's welcome the Nuremberg sound team. First up, we have Dialog and ADR supervisor Ulrika Akander. Ulrika somehow has never been on Tonebenders previously, which seems basically impossible. I'm not sure how this has happened, so I'm very glad to finally have you on the show. It's great to talk with you today, Ulrika.
Thanks, Tim. I'm happy to be here.
Also joining us, we have Michael Babcock, who's the Re-Recording Mixer, sound designer, and supervising sound editor on Nuremberg. Michael has been on Tonebenders 3 times previously to talk about the Chicago 7, Heretic, and K-pop Demon Hunters. Welcome back to Tonebenders, Michael.
Great to talk again, Tim.
One of the things I love about our industry, about the sound community, is we get to work on wildly different things. Like if you went out to the general public and said the same person that did the sound for Nuremberg did the sound for K-pop Demon Hunters, that would blow people's minds. And same with Ulrika, the same person doing Nuremberg is also working on Anaconda that's coming out in a few weeks. Like these are wildly different movies. It's always fun that we get to be so different in our day-to-day work, get to really immerse ourselves in these like historic films and then do something wacky and comedic. It's always fun. But I'm wondering maybe with Nuremberg, when you first jumped on the project, what about it that you thought might have been easy or something that maybe turned out to be a much bigger challenge than you were expecting? Maybe Michael, do you want to take that first?
Well, yeah. Actually, the part that was more of a challenge was not the expected part. Like the expected part is it's a historical drama, so you have to be accurate with all the sounds and the period accurate. That actually wasn't difficult because it was kind of expected. Do the research. The thing that's in common with all these projects that we get to work on that are thankfully different is like you're still world building. So you're looking for ways to what's your jumping off point for world building. So I actually started the first conversation I had with James, our director, actually wasn't about period stuff. There's a little bit, a couple of things. It was like, hey, expected, do your research, make sure this train is accurate, make sure this car is accurate. Here's some things I'm thinking about sounds. We really started talking more about, actually, I started asking more questions because I was fascinated with the nuances of the performances. It's a movie that it has a lot of gray area as far as, these are complex human beings that did really evil things, and that's really reflected in the performances. So that that ended up being a creative jumping off point too, of what ways can we help enhance these performances without getting in the way of the performances, because he's not a paint by the numbers kind of person. He's not like, hear the dialogue, it's the most important thing. It's the what can we do to really convey this whole thing, and he'll use every single tool to do that. So that was probably that's the starting point. And getting in the weeds already, the biggest challenge on the movie was removing 2024 from the soundtrack. There's no hiding with what's going on in the dialogue. So it was using every single tool possible to try to, save as much of the performance as possible. And I'm sure Ulrika has a lot to say on that too, because she had a big, big, big job in this.
The really cool thing with this movie compared to a lot of other projects is that I came on earlier than normal. Even though this is actually an independent film, believe it or not, that got then picked up by Sony Classics. But what happened was there were a handful of scenes that the director and the picture editor, Tom Eagles, were worried about. They wanted to see what we can do to help preserve the actors' performances. And there was a scene in the rain. There was the stadium scene. That's like one of the big scenes in the film. There was also part of the courtroom. I think we also did the train platform scene, if I remember correctly. But basically to do like a first pass on it, see how deep we could start going as far as removing noise and stuff like that. Then I would give it to Mike. He would do a mix down of it. And then we would kind of keep updating those so that the picture editorial had clean tracks. Now, I'm not a big fan of going too deep, sucking the life out of production tracks, none of that. But this movie had so many challenges. And Balázs Varga, who was the production sound mixer, did a phenomenal job. I mean, it was like the way he managed to get in and get all the stuff recorded. For example, the courtroom scene, that's like over 25-minute long takes. The cross-examination and all that is literally all shot in one take. So he had to place out microphones and everything, the cell, and I'm sure we'll get back into that too, but that was literally shot in a small room with 2 actors, 2 cameras, 2 boom operators to help create that claustrophobic feel that we wanted, but it's made out of wood. So the reflection, it affected the sound in a way that we did not necessarily want. So Mike had to use all his tricks in the book to get that stuff out so we then could add back breaths, mouth clicks. The Foley was intricate in that scene to help put back the life. Mike had a very long dialogue pre-dub. We didn't do it like the normal way that we would pre-dub right before the final. We actually had a long spread out, kind of like a rolling pre-dub, where as soon as I had finished something up, I would send it to Mike. And we would kind of just keep doing it that way, which seemed to be the only way to do this film. Because it's like, I think we all cared so much about the project. It was like the most amazing collaboration between all the different people. And we had a small crew. I mean, me and Mike and music editor, 2 effects editors who were not on the stage, but that was it. And then Joe Zubin, who was our effects mixer, of course. To have that intimacy and to feel all these emotions. Texture was a huge keyword we had to find those like little intricate things, both in sound effects and in dialogue.
Every single trick I've learned in my entire career, I had to use. One of the reasons for that, besides being able to, make things as preserved as possible, is that the production sound was fantastic. So in some ways, a lot of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into the cleaning up of the dialogue had to do with the fact, like, well, these all sound great. And once you start going down a road of how can I really make this as dynamic with their performances? How can I, we have all these different angles and you can actually get more fidelity, but it's almost like you're mixing an album, like some of those court scenes going from angle to angle. Inside the Cell took a lot of experimentation. And I actually, to get in the weeds even more, there was a lot of bake-off between noise reduction. I'm also a fan of not over processing things, also using all those tools as aggressively as possible when you have to. And so there was a lot of bake-off between using different kind of noise reduction, and not just noise reduction, like reflection reduction techniques. So a big shout out to Hush. That became the winner in a lot of scenarios or combinations of that and a few other ones. That and actually Chameleon. The ability to match what little ADR we had to what the space is, and then actually in some cases taking space almost completely out and putting everything back through somewhat of a snapshot of what the Chameleon can do, and like with Foley and things like that, to be able to make it sound like nothing happened was extremely fun, scary, and thankfully worked.
So you're saying you took a ton of noise out, and then it was super clean, and in order to give it the life back, you used Chameleon to put the reflections in the room and on the Foley and stuff to make it come back to life again? Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Particularly in the cell scenes, because it's even a story point where those cells have to be, it's German cement, and it has to be thick cement, and it's and that is not how that room sounded. I mean, it sounded like plywood.
There is a scene with the first time they're in there, Russell Crowe's character is knocking on it, and
oh yeah,
it sounds like wood.
It does not now.
It does not now. No,
getting rid of like the early reflections and preserving all those There's no hiding. There's on the sound design side, we were trying to reflect moods of even the nuances of as the mood changes throughout the performance. Like we're trying to get away with that, and the background really in a lot of the scenes, as things get darker, the sound design is getting darker. But to be able to make what the production sounded like and save all that, there's no hiding. That's why it took a while.
Another good example is the train station, because that again is part of it is one long scene. They're sitting on that bench. It's a set built out of wood, so we have all these extras walking back and forth on a wooden surface. It's a lot of words. They're talking a lot, and it's like one of the pivotal scenes in the entire film that is like you really want to preserve that performance. Again, there's no ADR in that scene except for one added line from Rami Malek. From an artistic point of view, we wanted it to get more and more into a bubble that is just the two of them. Just the other day, I listened to some of these raw dailies again, and it's like, it's airplanes, it's the footsteps, they're shuffling back, because it's a lot of people on that platform, and their exterior, and it's 2024. I guess it was 2024 they shot it. So it's like, for us to be able to create that feel was pretty amazing. I mean, once it's like you realize that it actually can be done. Overall, it's the ADR in this film is only added lines, narration, and some lines for German from both Russell Crowe and Leah Woodall. And then we just went in for those words and did like a combo platter, let's call it, using Chameleon then often to make that seamless.
It's not often that I get to talk to the Dialog supervisor and the Dialog mixer on the same call. So I'm wondering if we can talk about your working process for noise reduction. How much is Ulrika doing? How much are you leaving for Michael? How much are you bouncing out so it's burned in? Maybe, Ulrika, if you want to start with that.
What I did was I pulled all the channels that were usable. Sometimes it's the actual person's loft, sometimes it's the other person's, sometimes it's a plant. Then all together with a boom, I use auto-align post. That's a must. I will cut it and I will make it. I'm all about the visual. I want it to be easy to mix. So you'll see exactly what belongs together and where you're going. But then particularly for these scenes, I would also run it through Hush in this case as an option and mute it, and Mike could use it or lose it, try it or not, just to have as an option. I rarely go deep in the noise reduction, and if I do, I will keep that as a separate thing, group it and mute it, or present that and have the original grouped and muted. I do general cleanup, RXing, or swapping out syllables or whatever, just things that may be needed, but I always will keep a copy of the original, or I will not do the entire piece, so you can draw out the handle and redo it should it be needed. And then I would hand it off to Mike. As soon as I had like something that resembled mixable shape, so to speak, I would send it to Mike. Since we decided that pretty early on, knowing from these 3-4 scenes that we had worked on early that this may be the way to go on this one, that as soon as I had something, I would just send it to Mike.
Anything that gives you the luxury of time to experiment. It's such a team effort, really, on every movie. But luckily, Ulrika and I, we've known each other for a long time, so because there's a lot of back and forth, and luckily being able to experiment. But experience is actually, it plays a pretty good role in it, because there are, sometimes you do get tracks from people that are, things have gone too deep, and knowing that you can actually get away with not having to go so deep because you have other things you can hide behind, or knowing when you can't hide something. Like you have to become a filmmaker, I guess, to figure out when and when not to do things. But luckily, Ulrika has a lot of experience. It's funny, auto line, getting even more into the weeds. There's a bit of an art to auto lining. It's not just like, if you make everything in phase, all that kind of stuff. Because I've actually found I go to pre-dub things that are auto lined, and sometimes it takes some of the life out of it. And you go back to like, what was the mix track? And you're like, well, okay, I'd really be great if I could have a little more separation on this, but there's something about the mix track that has phase issues that sometimes sounds better. So like, there's a real art to auto aligning. I'm not one of those people that knows how to do that. So anyone who knows how to do that, we need you. You're an unsung hero more than you realize.
Yeah, it's not always the mic or the channel that you think is going to lead. That's the one that you...
Sometimes it's the other actor.
Yeah.
That's being featured.
Yeah, so you kind of need to... It's like a trial and error thing, and certainly not batch auto align anything. And I never do like continuous. I keep it so also that you can have the handles on each side, that it will be like up to like 10-15 second handles, stuff like that. I kind of keep it so that you don't have to redo it, because that's a pet peeve of mine. If there are editors, you don't have any handles on the side, or that you've used the wrong channel, or because it seems like if you do multiple channels, it doesn't always line up the way you want it to. So that became another time-consuming thing then on my part, especially for the courtroom scene, where I had like 20-plus channels, then with the booms, plant mics, everybody on lofts. And then I had booms that were lower level, just in case there were outbursts, which there were. So Balvargas had really covered all the bases. But then to weed through that was a job in its own. I think there are like 300 extras or something in the room as well. But still, we wanted it to be about Goering and Jackson, that it's their battle.
You've led me right into my next question perfectly. Thank you very much. Let's talk about that courtroom scene. It's a huge scene, and yet it's a really intimate scene. As you say, there's many, many extras. Each side of the lawyer teams have multiple people in them. There's the judges, which I think there's 4 or 5 judges along the side of the room. And yet it all comes down to these 2 men standing 20 meters apart from each other. But you still have to keep that room alive with all those people. Do you want to talk about maybe if it was loop group, or how you kept the crowd alive without it interfering with this standoff happening on screen?
It was kind of a little bit of everything. Yeah.
We had loop group to kind of have the reactions and the kind of just as a presence more than anything. But it was so much about the 2 of them. We did shoot also. That was an interesting to get like really nerdy with the loop group. Because again, this was a low budget film, so there wasn't any money to have like a lot of group ADR days. And I had to cover Austria, Luxembourg, Germany, Russian, French. I mean, it was like all these languages. And then the American military police, and then the bars, and the party in Washington, D.C., and the big thing, the translators in the courtroom scene. We had to have people, women who would do, you see one shot that's like passing by the translators. So we wanted to have it as an element in case we felt like this will be a cool little added thing. And every time we cut to the Nazis in the stands, we had German translation, should we want it. So we shot all that stuff. And this was pretty interesting because I had a day and a half to shoot all this. I had over 200 cues, various languages and all that kind of stuff. So what we ended up doing was using Mike's room to shoot the translator stuff. The picture editor and Mike took one of these other actors one by one because I needed them also on the ADR stage for Wallace and stuff. So one at a time would go to Mike's room during this day of group ADR. And then day 2, I had half a day. That's when we had the American MPs and everything. Also the narrators, the Dateline Nuremberg and all that stuff.
I should point out that like my room is actually a dub stage at Sony. That
yeah, so it was a proper. It was a proper,
but also
room.
That room really kind of made all this time constraint less time constraint because it's where I pre-dubbed all the effects in there, I pre-dubbed all the dialogue in there. The ability to do it for a long period of time to actually have it's a luxury to have a dub stage every day as your office to be able to utilize in all kinds of different ways.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You just mentioned that you pre-dubbed the sound effects, but then another mixer came in to do the final pass.
It was part of the rolling temp idea because it wasn't just cleaning up dialogue. It was also like, if you're going to get really aggressive with sound, taking out noise, it's building all the backgrounds and even sound effects in places and sending it back there. But I was kind of pre-dubbing as we went. Each location in this movie really, from a sound design standpoint, is its own character. That's how James looked at it. Like the courtroom, he wanted it to breathe because it's this bombed out building. So there are creaks. There's actually a little bit of like a wind that makes its presence every now and then, along with the crowd. All this stuff is kind of weaving, depending on what you need to focus on, even down to the reverb. I would consider reverb in this movie almost like a sound design tool because like just the way the reverb sounds in the courtroom, it just had to feel like this very natural. And using that as a tool of like, oh, it's a big courtroom. And then as you start getting into the intensity of the performances, it actually became like the tool to really focus on what they're saying and how they're delivering it. Yeah, I pre-dubbed the effects in this, but the final mix, being able to bring Joe in, who's also a great, sound designer and mixer and sound supervisor himself, bringing someone in because that final mix really was a performance on this. We have a discussion, like James wants to have a discussion of like, here's what I want to try. I'm going to try to do this kind of thing. You're doing a lot of gut-based sound decisions as you're doing the final mix. What kind of tones and sound design type things are we going to be able to get away with? The scene out in the stadium, like there's a very deliberate, kind of moody, immersive wind.
There's a point in the film during the trial where the world kind of for the first time sees footage of what was going on at the camps. I'm assuming that that's the original footage. Was that the original sound? How did you approach the sound of this scene?
That is the original footage, and that's the original sound. And Ulrika can say there was more noise on that than what you hear. That was another experiment. There were different kinds of noise reduction that were tried before we got it. And then we actually ended up going with what we did with it, which was actually very close to somebody at some point. They sent it off to a special place to restore it. But we were able to take most of the optical noise out, put a little bit more back in for like dramatic effects. There's places where it's very deliberate where we're kind of putting it in. And so it's just the sound of the projector and that. But that's the original footage. And that is a rough scene.
It was a much more powerful film than I expected going in. As I mentioned in the intro, the sound was much more dense than I expected. I was expecting kind of a standard courtroom drama, and I got a lot more than that. The final question I have is maybe for Ulrika. There are a lot of actors doing accents that we're not used to them doing, but you're also saying there's very little ADR. So did you have any extra work because of the accents? Or?
Yes, we had for Russell Crowe and for Leo Woodall. We had them do some lines. We had dialect coaches that went in and flagged certain words. And I understand German, so I kind of heard which words that they meant. We did the lines. They just mimicked their performance, but with a proper pronunciation. Leo Woodall was amazing because considering he's actually British, He's a British actor who plays an American who's actually German. His job was just tremendous. The first time when Kelly meets Goering and they have this translation going on, you have a shot of Goering, but you hear Howie translating in the background, and the way it kind of flows back and forth, and Goering could be mixed lower, so you hear the translation and all that stuff. Most of that stuff in German was done in ADR, and then also when Slattery has the whole speech when the prisoners arrive, he's also translating in the background.
I've never worked on a film that had to have a dialogue translator like that. Are you just sending like audio files to them, or are they in the room while you're editing? Or
not when editing, but they sit in on the ADR session to point out. And for some reason, it seems like every other project I'm working on these past few years have had that. I just had that on Anaconda, and I have it on Bridgerton, and it's happening quite often, and it's really interesting to hear these dialect coaches getting the actor to get the correct sound, and then for my job then is to help identify that so that I know also exactly what the words are that needs to be replaced so that we don't replace more than we have to. But it's super fascinating with how some actors can just turn on that other language or dialect. A lot of Australian actors who plays Americans are like amazing. They will speak like with an Australian dialect, and then you start rolling, and then it's a perfect American accent. Maybe it's because I'm a foreigner myself. I do hear those nuances.
I actually didn't know until we were in the final mix that Leo Woodall was British. He doesn't just nail like an English accent. He's nailing like, American GI soldier accent. I'm just thinking about the performances and just sound and all that stuff. And when they told me that, I had a moment. I'm like, I would have picked up on that, and I didn't pick up on it.
For me, it's just as long as you get it close enough, the performances will kind of take over. If it becomes too perfect, then it would be kind of unbelievable. I mean, nobody thinks that Russell Crowe is German. He plays a part, and it's the approach that we had is just to get the words that are like mispronounced. We'll fix those. Everything else will just fly by because of his performance. And it's movies. It's like if it becomes too perfect in that sense, I think you lose a lot of it.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. There are definitely parts of the film that are heartbreaking and make you question why humanity is even still around. But then there's other parts of the film that remind you of why we are still around. Thank you for making such a lovely film, and I hope I get to talk to you guys again someday.
Yeah, I hope so also. It's always great to talk to you.
Thanks for having us.
Listeners in Los Angeles, come on out January 8th for a free screening of F1 the movie, plus a live recording of a Tonebenders episode with the F1 sound team. Check the link in this episode's description to sign up now. Sound Ideas is closing out the year with a massive year-end sale, and you're invited. From now through the end of December, enjoy 50% off all proprietary items, including premium sound effects and production music trusted by creators worldwide. Don't wait. These savings disappear on December 31st at midnight as the calendar moves into 2026. So check out sound-ideas.com today to save 50% and create something amazing. Tonebenders is produced by me, Timothy Muirhead. Theme music is by Jim Guthrie. You can reach me via email through info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow Tonebenders on Instagram to stay on top of new episodes. If you like the show, you can help us out by spreading the word to your friends and colleagues, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click support.